Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. It was nearly 10 years ago that a bright September day was darkened by the worst attack on the American people in our history.
At that point, that American foreign policy had to change in fundamental ways. The despair, the hopelessness, the poverty, the anger, the radicalism of people on the other side of the earth could directly hurt the American people in ways we had not seen before, and could hurt even more, could even be more destructive in an era of weapons of mass destruction. That was the justification for what happened in Afghanistan.
Our war on terror begins with al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
He decided in kind of a Texas swaggering way that he was going to go after all terrorism of global reach.
These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime.
Of course, people who would blow up the Twin Towers and kill all those people, you need to try and prosecute them and bring them to justice and stop those things going on. But to declare a war inflamed violence and divided the world more bitterly and was always completely stupid.
I think something had to be done, and it was pretty inevitable that that was what it was going to be. I think if you look at the situation in September 2001, America had been attacked, and I think from a terrorist group that was actually based in Afghanistan. In the circumstances, it seems to me pretty much inevitable it would happen.
Yeah, I think it was the right decision to make at the time. I would criticize some of the ways in which the war was implemented following the removal of the Taliban. I think there were a lot of mistakes made. One of the things I would have done is cooperated much more with Iran at the time in terms of Afghanistan's future. There were some efforts in that direction, but not enough.
طالبان دشمن ماست. آمریکا هم احساس می‌کرد طالبان دشمن آمریکاست. و سرنگونی طالبان در درجه اول تامین کننده منافع ایران.
Our second goal is to prevent regimes that sponsor terror from threatening America or our friends and allies with weapons of mass destruction. Some of these regimes have been pretty quiet since September the 11th, but we know their true nature. North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil.
Of course, Iran has been labeled for many years the premier state sponsor of terrorism, primarily because of its support for groups that oppose Israel, groups like Hezbollah and Hamas.
The axis of terror speech was a terrible mistake. It put together a number of different countries which were very different, and it made, I don't think Iran would have been a friend of the United States or the West in the last decade, but it certainly ensured that it would be a quite active enemy.
Saddam Hussein was unpopular, so they thought if they invaded, people would welcome them, then they could dominate the Gulf from Iraq and move the American troops from Saudi Arabia, where they weren't welcome because the holy places shouldn't have American troops. So it was all about American geopolitics, and thus all the lies, and thus all the mess. The Iraq War, it's set out in the Project for the New American Century. All the Bush people, before they took power, said what they wanted to do.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
Iraq fitted into the broader narrative of the war on terror. And indeed, there are some people who argue that right from the beginning, after 9/11, the American administration was thinking of Iraq, even though there was very little evidence to link Saddam to al-Qaeda.
They felt that having knocked off the government in Afghanistan very quickly, they could do the same in Iraq, and they were looking for what they thought would be easy victories. They did believe that Saddam Hussein had reconstituted or was beginning to reconstitute his weapons of mass destruction programs.
I think clearly this was one of the most successful operations by the intelligence community. There have probably been others, but we probably don't know about them. One of the problems the intelligence community will always tell you is that their failures end up on the front page of global newspapers. Their successes are never known. I think one of the big intelligence stories of the last 10 years has been the way in which the intelligence agencies have choked off al-Qaeda's money, the financial side of support for terrorism.
Over time, it has been possible to crack al-Qaeda, to learn a great deal about how it operates through monitoring various kinds of communications. Finally, of course, a lucky break, learning about a courier who went back and forth to bin Laden's compound.
Yet his death does not mark the end of our effort. There's no doubt that al-Qaeda will continue to pursue attacks against us. We must, and we will, remain vigilant at home and abroad.
When President Obama came into office, he stopped using the term war on terror. At the same time, very little else changed. So I think the terminology of a war on terror is no longer regarded broadly as a helpful terminology.
It was over before bin Laden was killed because they realized it was stupid.
I think that the United States would have created fewer enemies for itself had it not invaded Iraq, had it done a better job in Afghanistan, and certainly, if there had been reconciliation with Iran, the United States would have eliminated in a peaceful way a lot of the groups that are now opposed to the United States.
If I can go back a bit and say, when 9/11 happened, I thought this was going to define international politics and international security, probably for the rest of my lifetime. I now don't think that's the case. The events of the last couple of years, the financial crisis, the possibility of a depression, the Arab Spring, the rise of emergent powers. It may well be in 50 years' time when people look back, they'll see 9/11 as a blip. And the security situation nowadays probably is better than it has been for any time in the last 10 years. We're always going to have to live with the possibility of terrorist attacks. We did before 9/11 and we will for the next however many years. But whether that's going to be the key issue in international politics is another matter altogether.